Hi, I'm Ernie Conover. I'd like to show you how to turn different styles of rolling pins. Either makes a great gift and is a good seller at a craft fair. You want to start with very accurately sized wood because you need a perfect cylinder. And you need a little more than 2 inches. I like 2 1/4 to 2 1/2. These blanks are all 2 3/8, which makes a very nice pin. By far, hard maple is the best material. It's close grain, it washes well, it holds up for years. Soft maple is fine if you can't find hard. The first style we're going to turn is what's called a baguette pin. This will be turned to a cylinder and then tapered at each end for a distance of 4 inches. To that end, I have not only marked the centers of these billets very carefully, I've scribed a 1-inch circle on the end so that I can easily get to my final size. For the traditional or American style rolling pin, we are going to have a rotating handle on a trunnion on each end, and the blanks are a bit shorter, so they're easy to do in a mini lathe. Somewhere between 10 and 14 inches makes a very nice American style pin. Let's start with the baguette pin. The first task is to bring this to a perfect cylinder. Our finding perfect centers helped a lot with that. We're going to use a roughing out gouge and our fingers to tell us when we just come around, and we'll get a perfect cylinder. I'll show you how. The best tool for the job is a spindle roughing out gouge ground to a long angle. I'm not running real fast here, about 800 RPMs, and I always present that gouge a little high and then bring it down till it cuts. It helps greatly to take a piece of paraffin wax and wax your tool rest, because your gouge will slide much more freely on your tool rest. Now that I have this rolling pin nearly round for its entire length, I will just take a very light cut until I get all of the flat spots removed. And I can feel that if I use my thumb to hold the tool on the rest and just lightly touch right here at the back, and I can feel those flat spots just go away. And the idea here is to keep the tool moving. You lighten up your touch and move on, and then cut a little more aggressively as you come to a point where you can feel a flat spot. And there we have it, perfectly round in a cylinder of constant diameter. To get this perfectly smooth, there's 2 things you can do. One is use a skew, and if you're handy with a skew, it will plane this to a very nice finish. But you can do this with a roughing out gouge by turning it to about a 30-degree angle, bringing it down till it just cuts, and then sliding it along like this, keeping this 30-degree angle very, very constant. Just going like that, very light cut, but you'll be rewarded by a nice cylinder with a very good finish that'll need minimal sanding. A good way to smooth out your rolling pin is with a sanding mandrel and an electric drill. Our final task is to taper this area from 4 inches from each end down to 1 inch in diameter at the very end, and this will make the handles for this French style pin. Again, your roughing out gouge is the best way to do this. Very important is that you create a straight line taper down through here. You should be able to set a ruler on this, and it touches everywhere along here. It doesn't want to be curved in or bellied out. And there we have it. It's often called a baguette pin because it looks like a French baguette, a loaf of bread. A great finish for our rolling pin is either olive or walnut oil. I'm using olive oil here. And as you can see, that's bringing the curls of that maple right out. And give that a couple of weeks to age with some oil, and it'll just look stunning. I turned the cylinder for the main part of the American style pin in the same way that I turned the Baguette pin. I brought it to a perfect cylinder, and then I put a good chamfer on each end and faced each end so that it would be smooth, and it removed all centering marks. I now have to drill these with a 1/2 inch hole at each end, and that hole has to be in the axis of this rolling pin or it'll be goofy when you use it. So what I've done now is I've put a drill in the headstock, and I simply caught it on the other end with my center, and I'm watching my ram graduations very carefully here. And when I get to exactly the depth of 1 inch, I stop. Turn it around and I'll do the same thing. This is the 4.5 inch long by 1 inch square blank that I'm going to make the handles for our American style rolling pin. And that needs to have a 1/2 inch hole drilled all the way through it. And our lathe is again a great way to drill this hole. I go halfway and I simply turn this around, catch it with a live center again, and drill the other way until the 2 holes meet. Perfect. This is the 5 7/8 inch long by 3/4 inch square blank that I'm making the trunnion out of. I've turned it all the way down the length to this button head with a 1/2 inch wrench, and that has given me a nice slide fit with my handle. I'm now going to use a skew to bring this whole area slightly under 1/2 inch so that the handle turns quite freely. In fact, I want it to be a pretty sloppy fit so that the handle can even get wet and still turn freely. There, the handle's free to turn, but the trunnion's going to glue nicely in the end of the rolling pin itself. Now it's time to turn the outside of our handle. And to turn it, I've put a square of wood in a 4-jaw chuck and turned a tapered 1/2 inch tenon on there. So this gets tighter the further I push it up onto that. And that brings the whole bore in line with the axis of the lathe, so this handle will run very true once I turn it. There's our finished handle. Now we'll put this through it. There, turns freely, and there is our finished rolling pin. A variation on the rolling pin that you can easily make is to grind a little scraper. I used an old screwdriver, and I've ground it into a kind of a small round nose scraper. And by scraping grooves in here, I can make this rolling pin into a pasta maker, a pasta cutter. So you want to space these pretty evenly. You always point the scraper downhill, light touch, and you're not going to go real deep either. And from the center of the groove, I'm marking the next one. Almost done here. I've sharpened this scraper twice as I've gone across here. And I'm using it with a light touch, sort of wiggling it side to side to keep the opening a little bit bigger than the scraper. And I work the 2 sides at an angle till I get a pretty good flat there, a narrow flat. Do one more here. And there we are. This will allow us to roll this across dough and make spaghetti noodles. And there is our finished pasta cutter. Our efforts to maintain concentricity between our drilled holes and our trunnions has paid off, for we have a rolling pin and a pasta cutter in which the handles turn perfectly with no wonkiness. Just go to any kitchen store and you'll be appalled at the lack of contricity in the average rolling pin.